What about someone you knew was so creepy that you decided to distance yourself from them? Story 1. Back in my sophomore year of high school, there was this guy in my gym class. He was a year younger than me and didn't really fit in. He told everyone he was gay, and instead of being supported, he ended up kind of isolated. On top of that, he had some quirky habits and wasn't the most put together, so people avoided him. I knew what it was like to be different and get bullied, so I decided to be nice to him. I offered to be his gym partner. At first, he seemed grateful. After a few weeks, though, things got strange. He started acting in ways that made me uncomfortable. Later, he even admitted he wasn't actually gay. He just said it to get sympathy. That was a red flag for me, so I distanced myself. Fast forward to the next school year. I had transferred to a trade school, so I wasn't at the high school anymore. Then one day, I heard news that shocked me. My old school had gone into lockdown. It turned out that same guy had gotten into serious trouble involving a weapon, and there were reports that he had even made a list of people he wanted to target. Looking back, it was surreal to realize how close I'd been to someone who ended up in such a dark place. It really made me trust my instincts more when something feels off about someone's behavior. It's okay to step away. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. There was a girl I knew who seemed to thrive on negativity. For a while, she was crashing at my place, and every morning I'd drive her to work. One day, she was in the passenger seat, absolutely breaking down, sobbing, saying how much she hated her job. We're driving along when we come across a really bad accident. The second she saw it, her tears stopped instantly, and then she smiled. A huge, genuine, almost glowing smile. I had never seen her so happy. I was stunned. I asked her, why the sudden change? She started laughing, not just a chuckle, but full-on uncontrollable giggles. Then she told me that it looked like the crash was serious, and that seeing it made her day. I just sat there, completely creeped out. For the next couple of days, she was weirdly cheerful, like that accident had flipped a switch in her. Story 3. I once went on a date with a guy I met while he was donating blood at my workplace. We went out for dinner, and I thought it went pretty well. After our meal, we decided to keep the conversation going in his car. It started getting a bit steamy, and we were making out, but we both agreed to take a step back since it was still the first date. Then things took a turn. No matter what I brought up, he somehow steered the conversation back to physical intimacy, specifically his obsession with certain intense topics. I tried changing the subject a few times, but he just kept circling back. And then out of nowhere, he drops this bomb. He tells me he's into something called knife play. And not just that, he casually mentions watching videos where people are like hurt slowly. At that point, my brain just went, nope, absolutely not. I was taken aback and tried to brush it off, saying I wasn't into that sort of thing. The vibe shifted and I realized it was getting late, so I made my exit, and honestly, I haven't seen him since. Story 4. Back in high school, I used to run a Dungeons & Dragons group. We decided to bring in a new player who was really enthusiastic about joining. At first, he was a little socially awkward, but once he warmed up, he actually turned out to be pretty funny, and we liked having him around. Things got complicated because he had a huge crush on my cousin who was also in the group. For a while, they even dated, so it seemed like everything was fine. Then, during one of our big Halloween games, things took a really uncomfortable turn. My cousin was in costume, dressed as a bold Hooters waitress, and this guy started acting strangely. Everyone at the table noticed his behavior getting more and more off as he was shaking and his face turned red. Finally, it reached a point where it became clear he wasn't behaving appropriately at the table. The whole table was shocked, and my cousin called him out in front of everyone. He got up, left for a few minutes, and then came back like nothing had happened, ready to just continue the session. That was the last time he played with us. It was sad because I don't think he fully understood why it was such a big deal, but it definitely crossed a line that we couldn't ignore. Story 5. There's a girl I know who has a peculiar habit. She seems to take pleasure in making people cry. It's almost like a sport for her, and she actively tries to lead others into that emotional state. Recently, I had a conversation with her after a mutual friend tragically lost his father in a car accident. Rather than showing compassion, she brought up the incident, seemingly hoping to provoke tears from him. When I confronted her about this, she shrugged it off, insisting she didn't see anything wrong with it. Everyone does it, she claimed, as if that justified her actions. I suggested she might want to seek help for her behavior, but she simply dismissed the idea, saying it was something she enjoyed. It's unsettling to think that someone could derive satisfaction from others' pain, and it left me wondering how someone can be so blind to the impact of their actions. Story 6. As a kid, I had a pretty active imagination, but it took a dark turn when I heard a terrible story from my mom. She told me about the girl who lived just down the block, who quote-unquote accidentally squeezed her hamster to death. Can you imagine that? Suddenly, the fun trips to their house came to a screeching halt. My mom decided it was best to keep me away from her. I remember feeling a mix of fear and sadness. I loved playing with animals, and now the thought of that poor hamster haunted me. It wasn't just about the little creature. It was the idea that something innocent could be so quickly lost. Even at that young age, I understood how delicate life could be, and it made me think twice about all my future pet playdates. It's funny how one story can change your perspective forever, shaping your childhood in unexpected ways. Story 7. In high school, I found myself in a chilling situation with my boyfriend. He actually tried to convince me to enter into an end-of-life pact, insisting it would be some kind of twisted romance if we died together. It's hard to believe someone could think like that. As time went on, I started to feel more and more uneasy around him. His words haunted me, and I knew I had to create distance. I slowly pulled away because, honestly, he scared me. Even now, years later, and after moving thousands of miles away, I can't shake off that fear. He has some serious issues that I hope he's working through. It's a reminder of how important it is to prioritize our own well-being, even when faced with someone else's darkness. Story 8. A friend of mine had her sister, along with her sister's boyfriend and their baby, move in with her. Back in high school, my friend's place was the go-to party spot. We all thought we were living out our gangster dreams, especially when her sister's boyfriend moved in. We'd heard he had just gotten out of prison for what we thought was bank robbery, and honestly, we thought he was the coolest guy around. But then, reality hit hard. We discovered he was actually in jail for SA. It was shocking to find out he was living with his newborn son. We were all left speechless, thinking, what the heck? Our group quickly distanced ourselves from that house, especially as things took a turn for the worse. Eventually, both he and my friend's sister ended up back in prison, though not for anything SA-related. The child was placed into state custody, leaving us all to grapple with the unsettling truth of the situation. Story 9. I was starting to make friends with a girl at university. She had some unusual mannerisms, but I shrugged it off. Soon, she started showering me with compliments, calling me pretty, and saying I was different from other girls. Honestly, I think she had a crush on me. I didn't mind the attention, but I'm not attracted to girls, so I didn't encourage it. Then I heard some troubling news. Through a friend, I learned she had been making inappropriate comments about me. That was already unsettling, but it got even weirder. One day, she sat behind me and left her notebook open. A classmate, glancing at it, noticed something off. The page contained a diary-like entry addressed to God, where she confessed she felt sinful for feeling lustful and claimed it was my fault. She believed I was leading her to hell. I was completely taken aback. My friend and I decided to keep quiet about it and create some distance from her. It felt like she might have left that notebook open on purpose, and it made the whole situation feel even more bizarre. Story 10. I had a friend named Dan, a neighbor I met at local parks and pools. He hung out with my best friend in karate, and during those bring your friend days, he had this strange habit of chasing us into the bathroom just to see our socks. It always left us puzzled. Fast forward to high school, and Dan came out as gay, and surprisingly, he also announced he was a staunch Republican. Not the moderate type, but more like the Tea Party. His comments grew increasingly offensive, especially after a dear friend of mine tragically took his own life. Dan actually told me my friend deserved it. Things took a weird turn when he started wearing trench coats to school, and then he'd go even further, tying himself to tables with a leash and collar. I tried to be nice, but eventually, I had to cut him out of my life. Just when I thought I'd escaped him in college, I learned he was coming to my campus. By then, he was deep into substance, and one of my friends thought he was charming. I warned him to stay away, but he didn't listen. Dan ended up essaying him. Honestly, I hate him with every fiber of my being. Story 11. As a student nurse, I had an eye-opening experience during my recent placement in a ward dedicated to caring for elderly women. One day, an 80-something-year-old patient had her son, who appeared to be in his 50s, come to visit. At first glance, it seemed a bit unusual for a man his age to still be living with his mother, but he acted perfectly normal. Later that day, another staff member approached me with some shocking information. She revealed that the son had confided in her just the day before, explaining that not only did he live with his mother, but they also shared a bed. I was taken aback. The whole situation felt incredibly unsettling. It raised so many questions and made me realize just how complex family dynamics can be, especially in the context of caregiving. Story 12. When I transferred to a new high school, one of my first friends, let's call him John, made a big impression. He was a fantastic guy, an aspiring Mr. Olympia, totally shredded, and had a big heart. Everyone loved him, and we all thought he was destined for greatness. After we graduated, life got busy, and it took a few years for our group to reconnect. John stayed active on Facebook, sharing his bodybuilding journey and updates on competitions. Then one night, he showed up unannounced at a friend's bonfire. It was great to see him, but something felt off right from the start. As he joined our gatherings, the unease grew. He started pushing ideas, like a spring break trip to Cancun, or sharing stories about his dad growing weed. But it was clear to me that his interest was directed squarely at me. One night while I was with a girl, he kicked the door in, claiming he was just looking for a place to crash. It wasn't about jealousy, it was about his desire for me. I don't mind anyone's orientation, but I found it strange how my old friend turned into a stalker. He messaged me constantly, grew increasingly touchy at parties, and I even had to block him on Facebook after he unnervingly described my house, a place he'd never been. Despite my efforts, he created alternate accounts just to reach out. Then, after years of silence, he resurfaced at a classmate's going-away party. I was sitting by the bonfire when he arrived, and our group was stunned. The first thing he said was, "Where's that guy?" I made sure to keep the fire between us for the rest of the night. Story 13. It hit me like a ton of bricks one day. Almost all of his so-called friends were teenage girls, mostly around 13 to 15 years old. I had thought it was just because I was so mature for my age that a guy in his early 20s found me fun to hang out with. But reality was different. I tried to bring it up with some of my girlfriends who were also friends with him, hoping they'd see the concern. I remember asking, what does a 21-year-old guy possibly gain from spending time with a bunch of teenagers? To me, the answer was glaringly obvious, yet they couldn't grasp it. They were defensive, even offended, at the idea we might not be the coolest crowd around. One friend, Amber, insisted that we were just more mature than your average 14-year-olds. But I thought, we're still 14. Why isn't he hanging out with people from his college instead? Eventually, I chose to distance myself whenever he was around. Over time, they stopped seeing him after he dated and broke up with a few of them. Looking back, it makes my skin crawl. As an adult now, I can't help but wonder how I would ever feel safe letting my future kids leave the house alone. Story 14. I recently wrapped up my time in the Navy and enrolled in community college. Just a couple of weeks in, I received an email from someone claiming, "Hey, you went to X school for 1st and 2nd grade, right? We used to hang out." The name sounded familiar, and sure enough, I recognized him from back then. When he showed up at the library, that initial spark of recognition hit me, but there was something off. His demeanor was almost eerie. We exchanged greetings, but as our conversation unfolded, I noticed he was mirroring everything I said. I casually shared, "I just got out of the Navy after 6 years. To my surprise, he replied, "I just got out of the Navy too." I probed further, asking how long he'd served. 6 years, he confirmed. Curious about his role, I asked, "What was your rate?" His response? "I don't remember. That's a red flag for anyone in the Navy. It's a dead giveaway of a lie." After that strange encounter, I wondered if he had been lurking around, digging for names online, rather than just reaching out to an old friend. I never saw him again, and honestly, didn't care to. It definitely ranks among the oddest interactions I've had. Story 15. We had a new guy in our unit, and I was tasked to take him to the motor pool. He didn't have a car, so I ended up driving my coupe. As I settled in, this guy surprised me by folding down the passenger seat and crawling into the back. He closed the door and planted himself right in the middle, completely ignoring my attempts to get him to take the front seat. Whatever, I thought. As we drove to the motor pool, he kept insisting that he was the behavioral health specialist and that I could come to him for anything. He said it with such emphasis, and whenever I glanced in the rearview mirror, there he was, staring right at me. It was unnerving to say the least, and I made sure to avoid any interaction after that. Things took a turn later on when he got promoted to NCO. Turns out he was charged for misconduct and ultimately got kicked out. It was a wild experience I won't forget anytime soon. Story 16. I once had a friend whose house was, let's say, less than pristine. I'm not one to judge, but this place was pretty messy. One day I visited her after school, and we headed straight to her bedroom. As soon as I stepped inside, I was hit with a sight that I just couldn't ignore. There were at least 5 pairs of well-worn inners strewn across the floor. I'm trying to keep it polite here, but let's be real. They were crusty, creased, and had visible marks. I did my best to look past it and made a quick excuse to leave. Honestly, it put me off visiting for a while, but a few months later, curiosity got the better of me, and I returned with another friend. To my shock, the same inners was still there, this time with even more piles, and you guessed it, even dirtier. It wasn't exactly creepy, but the fact that they were just left out in the open made me uneasy. It's strange to think she didn't mind others seeing it. Some things just stick with you, you know? Story 17. There's this cousin of mine who used to joke that if we weren't related, he'd totally ask me out. Honestly, he was lucky to have such a hot cousin. He would follow me around at family gatherings, finding every excuse to hug me. Things took a turn when I started bringing my serious boyfriend around to meet the family. I could tell my cousin was jealous. He even warned my boyfriend, saying that if he ever hurt me, he'd hurt him. Thankfully, my boyfriend is pretty sassy and knows how to handle the situation. But my cousin didn't stop there. Every time he spotted my boyfriend putting an arm around me or getting close, he'd quickly back off, just waiting for the next chance to get near me. Now, he's started avoiding me altogether since I keep bringing my boyfriend around. And honestly, I'm not making it easy for him either. I've been a bit more distant. Guess he didn't expect that. Story 18. Let me tell you about someone I can't shake from my mind. I'll call him Creepy Larry. He was the boyfriend of a friend of mine, and his background was just unsettling. His parents dabbled in cult-like activities, and there were always whispers about his past. It was as if I was looking at every red flag you'd expect from a horror movie killer. During our one encounter, I was struck by how creepy he truly was. He had this flat, emotionless demeanor, like he was completely disconnected from reality. At a party, instead of mingling, he sat quietly in a corner, sketching something that looked like a distorted face. It gave me chills. Then things got worse. Out of nowhere, he pulled out wooden LARPing swords and swung it near a kid, scaring the crap out of the kid. What did Larry do next? He just walked away, leaving the poor kid on the ground, and returned to the party like nothing happened. Now he works at my local grocery store, and that cold stare of his still haunts me. Creepy Larry? Yeah, no thanks. Story 19. I'm pretty sure my friend is dating a sociopath. And honestly, it's unsettling. This guy seems like he studied a handbook on how to manipulate people. It's creepy. During a recent get-together, he was flirting with me right in front of her, but in a sneaky way that made it hard to call him out. My husband was ready to confront him, and honestly, none of us in the group like him. We just feel bad for our friend. Every time this guy walked by at our gathering, he would deliberately place his hand on my lower back or shoulder, even though there was plenty of space for him not to. And he did this with everyone, including the guys. The situation escalated when we were leaving. He had the nerve to touch my husband's cheek. That's when my husband firmly told him to never touch him again. But the guy just laughed it off. It's alarming to think he wants to work with mentally ill patients. How can someone like that be in a position to help others? Story 20. I once had a friend whose obsession with a sports celebrity crossed some seriously strange boundaries. It got so intense that I eventually couldn't stand being around her. She went to incredible lengths, even committing fraud to gather tens of thousands of dollars just to move to the city where he played. Her devotion didn't stop there. She started learning his native language, writing detailed plans to communicate with him. It was almost eerie how she centered her life around his jersey number. She'd insist on keeping the temperature in her house set to that exact number. Thankfully, it wasn't something too outrageous. One time, she made a sign for him at a game, and when he noticed, she was convinced he would remember her forever. The kicker? This sports star was married to a supermodel, and she was just as fixated on his wife. Her fixation twisted into something uncomfortable, and honestly, it became too much for me. With her extreme behavior, I realized I couldn't be around that kind of obsession. Story 21. There was this guy I knew who had a knack for showing up to parties in a rather questionable state. It wasn't unusual for him to get completely hammered and parade around in just his briefs, thinking it was all in good fun. But now, things have taken a dark turn. He's currently awaiting trial on some seriously alarming charges, apparently charged with SA. It's crazy how someone who seemed so carefree at social gatherings could be entangled in something so horrific. It's a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the people we think we know best can hide a much darker side. Story 22. Not long ago, I met a guy, let's call him D, at a local anime and gaming convention. I usually set up in Artist Alley, while D sold secondhand graphic tees and old gaming merchandise. Our first conversation was pretty chill. We connected over our shared interests. But things took a turn at another con. When my boyfriend joined me, he ended up buying a stack of Cyberpunk 2020 RPG handbooks from D. A few months later, D reached out, suggesting I let him know if my boyfriend ever started a Cyberpunk campaign after our move to his city. I thought, sure, why not? But then the conversation got really uncomfortable. Out of the blue, D started sharing personal details about his significantly younger girlfriend. He mentioned how dry she was and how they hadn't been intimate in a while. To my horror, it became clear he was trying to involve me in some sort of proposed three-people action. I didn't want to hear any of it, so I explained that my boyfriend and I weren't in an open relationship anymore due to some serious trust issues stemming from a past problems. D's response, well, when you get over that, hit me up. I couldn't believe it, as if I'd just casually reach out to him after overcoming trauma for a wild night. He even started sending me Pickle Rick emoticons, which he apparently thought was clever, but just made me feel even more uncomfortable. Needless to say, I've been keeping my distance from him since then. Story 23. In college, I had a friend who I thought was just that, a friend. She seemed so cool, always ready to help anyone. But it turns out it was mostly an illusion, and many of her stories were just lies. She had been prescribed painkillers for something but casually shared them with me while we hung out, often getting high together in her car, driving through the cornfields, listening to music and chatting. One day, she picked me up at my dorm and offered me a drink. It was already open, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I took a sip and noticed something off. It tasted like painkillers. Maybe I was just paranoid, I thought. Still, I asked her to take me back home, but she insisted we stop by her place first. When we walked in, I was hit with the sight of a total disaster. Piled dishes, trash bags lying around. She started ranting about how messy her roommates were and how she had just cleaned. I could barely process her words while watching her flirtatiously bend down in front of me. Suddenly, I felt the effects of those painkillers: blurred vision, itchy skin, and an urgent need to escape. I texted my brother to meet me on campus, warning him to come find me if I didn't show up. The last thing I remember is hugging him, and then I woke up the next day. She never reached out to me again, but made sure to ask our mutual friends why I was upset. "You're lucky I didn't spill everything, Jessica." And a tip: if a girl is obsessed with horses, run far and fast and don't look back. Story 24. I once had a friend whose jealousy knew no bounds. She couldn't handle the fact that I was in a relationship, so she sent my boyfriend a message under a fake identity, pretending to be a Chinese student. Her claim? That I was only dating him to advance my own interests. It was the weirdest, most intense act of stalking I'd ever experienced, especially for being in college. Then there was another friend who reared his head at the worst possible moment. Just days after my significant other passed away, he messaged me asking if I'd heard the shocking news about my boyfriend's death. As if that wasn't enough, he began to act like we were close friends, hoping to find a way back into my life. The final straw came when he told me I needed to move on and get my act together. After that insensitive remark, I cut ties for good. Some friends are just not worth holding on to. Story 25. My friend's wife is truly something else, manipulative to the core. She practically forced him to cut ties with all his old friends, leaving him only allowed to hang out with her crowd. She's not too fond of me either, often dropping biting comments in my direction. It's like she thrives on being cold and controlling, a textbook narcissist. On a trip, she even got him drunk just to get pregnant, knowing the pressure that comes with their family's rule about marrying if you have a baby. It felt like he was backed into a corner. Being an only child, her parents bought them a house. But here's the kicker: her parents can drop by anytime, while his need to ask for permission first. Now they're juggling twins, and every day it's like a flood of their pictures on Facebook, at least 8 snapshots. But what really worries me is the situation they're in. Living in a state that's tough on guys during divorces and custody battles, he's stuck making less than $35,000 a year. If they separate, he's in serious trouble. I haven't even seen the kids yet, mostly because I'm avoiding her. I just know she'd be right there, and I'm not ready for that. Story 26. At a friend's party, my 2 buddies and I shared a room. Things took a weird turn when one of my friends got sick, and we advised him to hit the bathroom. Once he left, the other friend, who was lying on the bed next to me, started coming on to me pretty intensely. He began stroking my face and arms, telling me how nice I was. It was flattering at first, but when I tried to pretend I was sleeping, he didn't let up. He kept rubbing my back and getting way too close for comfort. It made me really uneasy, especially since I was drunk and felt out of it. I wanted to brush it off for the sake of our friendship, but when he pulled similar moves while I was driving him home later, I knew I had to distance myself. Sometimes you have to set boundaries to protect your space, even if it's tough to do within a friend group. Story 27. I had a friend who crossed some serious boundaries during our voice chats. Once he didn't realize I could hear him sounding shaky and out of breath while he was indulging himself. At first, I brushed it off and kept in touch with him, thinking maybe it was just a phase. But over time, the uncomfortable vibes added up. It finally clicked for me just how many times I'd overlooked his behavior and forgiven him. Eventually, I knew I had to distance myself. It was a tough choice, but I realized my comfort needed to come first. Sometimes it takes a while to see the red flags, but stepping back was the right move for my peace of mind. Story 28. Growing up, my best friend's cousin was incredibly creepy, and we did everything we could to avoid him. One day, at their house, I witnessed something shocking. They had a koi pond, and out of nowhere, this kid picked a fish from the water and smashed its head with a hammer. Just like that. It was disturbing to watch, and I couldn't understand why his parents never stepped in to stop him. How could they let this happen? It was such a bizarre and unsettling experience that we did our best to steer clear of him after that. Fast forward to today, and I recently found out that he's married now. Can you believe it? What a wild transformation from a kid who caused so much chaos. Story 29. I had an online friend who lived in England while I was in Ireland. One day, something unexpected happened. He accidentally sent me videos of himself in a very private moment. Yes, you guessed it. It was completely out of the blue and left me feeling shocked and confused. At that age, I didn't really know how to react. It made me think about the boundaries of online friendships and the risks of sharing too much. Looking back, it's a wild reminder of how digital interactions can sometimes blur the lines in unexpected ways, especially when we're still figuring out who we are. Story 30. I once had a friend from work who seemed really smart and normal. This guy had even won on Jeopardy! We hung out occasionally, and I enjoyed his company, until one fateful day. We stopped by a corner store to pick up some groceries, and I noticed him repeatedly eyeing a young woman who was stocking shelves. Then he leaned in and whispered something that sent chills down my spine. You know, the laws are so ridiculous in this country. You leave the States and people have a different attitude. He talked about his frequent trips to Thailand, and it all clicked into place. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I dashed to my car and drove away. The next day, he tried to engage with me at work, but I completely ignored him and handed in my 2 weeks' notice. Just thinking about him made me sick. I reported him, even without any solid evidence. I was surprised to receive backlash for sharing my story, as if the report wasn't implied. This experience really made me reconsider my presence on Reddit. Story 31. In college, I had this neighbor who wasn't exactly a friend, but was always around for a chat. He was a bit strange, yet harmless enough. As the school year wound down, he casually revealed to a friend on our dorm floor that he'd been stealing inners from the laundry room, specific pairs from specific girls. He even flaunted his collection like it was a trophy. Naturally, this friend reported him to the resident assistant, and it took about 2 weeks for the dorm to take action. They needed proof, but soon enough, the girls he claimed to have stolen from confirmed their missing items. Finally, the guy was kicked out, and he approached me afterward, asking if I could put in a good word for him. But honestly, no way, we weren't cool anymore. Story 32. As a freshman in high school, I found myself hanging out with a senior who seemed nice enough. My family was totally fine with our friendship. We bonded over our shared music taste, and every day after gym class, he would give me a hug. Looking back, it's wild how many red flags I ignored. He'd wait by my locker and walk me to class, and I genuinely thought we were best friends. Then came December, and I started dating someone. When my friend discovered I was taking my boyfriend to the winter dance instead of him, he lost it. At the dance, my boyfriend and I were at one of the smaller tables, when suddenly, this guy stepped up, practically nose to nose with my boyfriend, ready to throw punches. I jumped in saying, "Go home. I didn't come to this dance with you. He's my boyfriend." His reaction: he tried to flip a table but just ended up sliding it awkwardly against the wall. Later that night, my phone blew up with messages from him. Apparently, he had broken his fist after punching a brick wall and then drowned his sorrows in a sea of alcohol. I chose to ignore the pity messages and moved on, never looking back. In hindsight, I wondered if I accidentally led him on, but he never expressed any romantic feelings. It's strange how some friendships can take unexpected turns. Story 33. Last week, a new guy transferred to my department. As I walked into the change room, I spotted him for the first time. I casually said, "Hey, how's it going?" But he just stared blankly at me and didn't reply. I figured maybe he was just quiet or shy, so I didn't think much of it. Then, while I was bending over to grab my boots from my locker, I turned around and there he was, standing completely naked. He was facing away from me, and I was taken aback. I quickly changed my boots and hurried out of there. Later, I found out that this was his weird routine. He's been doing it for years. It's safe to say that was not what I expected on my first encounter with the new guy. Just wow. Story 34. I walked into my apartment, ready to unwind, but what I found was shocking. My roommate had his girlfriend pinned to the floor, and her shirt was ripped. She was crying, and when our eyes met, it was clear something was wrong. In an instant, she bolted out the door, leaving me stunned. My roommate, he just vanished into his room, not saying a word. The next day, I made a decision. I kicked him out. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. I couldn't quite piece it together, but something felt deeply wrong. I didn't know the girl well enough to reach out, and this was before the days of social media where everyone was connected. Later, I reported what I saw to the police, but sadly, it seemed to go nowhere. I assumed it was because she never filed a report herself. It was a haunting moment that made me realize how silence can be so powerful and how much we don't really know about the struggles happening behind closed doors. Story 35. I once rented a room from a guy who opened up to me about his troubling past. He revealed with tears in his eyes that he abused his pets as a child. It was an unsettling conversation, and I didn't know how to react. After a weekend visit to my hometown to see family, I returned to find something unsettling. My pillow was missing. When I confronted him about it, he casually said he let his mom borrow it during her visit. Instead of offering one of the countless other pillows he had, he chose mine. That moment was a wake-up call. I felt a strange mix of discomfort and distrust as I realized I couldn't stay there any longer. From that point on, I isolated all my belongings in my bedroom, making sure nothing else went missing. Before long, I packed up and moved out as quickly as I could. It was a lesson learned. Sometimes people can surprise you in ways you never expected. Story 36. One Shar. In high school, there was this guy who gave off a seriously creepy vibe. He was all about that dark, goth style and would often message me on MySpace, wanting to chat. One day, out of nowhere, he showed up at my house. I still have no idea how he figured out where I lived, since I never shared my address with him. Later, I learned that he had a troubling side. He aggressively pursued another classmate and ended up assaulting him. The situation escalated quickly, and the police became involved. It resulted in him being pulled out of school, but after that I lost track of what happened to him. That whole experience was a chilling reminder of how things can quickly go wrong with the wrong person. Story 37. Scumming you all a 7. In high school, there was this guy who took creeping to a whole new level. He would sneakily record girls in skirts with his phone, capturing their inners from underneath. It was beyond disgusting, yet he was so proud of his twisted achievements that he tried to show off his videos to other guys in class. Sure, it might not be the most extreme story out there, but it left me feeling sick and furious. Who does that? I remember how unsettling it felt to be around him, knowing what he was doing. As soon as graduation came around, I made sure to block him from all my social media. I wanted nothing to do with someone who thought that behavior was okay. It's a reminder of just how important it is to stand up against such creepy actions and support those who might be affected by them. Story 38. It all started shortly after we moved into our new house. I found myself home alone while my boyfriend was at work, enjoying a sunny day on the front porch, brushing our dog. That's when a short, balding man approached, hobbling across the hot gravel in his socks. He introduced himself as our new neighbor, eager to say hello since the previous resident was apparently antisocial. I felt uneasy about inviting him in, so we chatted in the blazing sun. As he spoke, he revealed a lot. He had battled childhood cancer, started smoking at just 5 years old, and struggled with severe bipolar disorder. The neighbors, he claimed, were troublesome because they didn't want his loud four-wheeler disturbing the night. We ended up talking for 2 hours, during which he nursed a single cigarette. His slurred speech reminded me of someone intoxicated, though I couldn't smell alcohol. He shared dark tales from his past, including his battle with alcoholism. I was relieved when the internet installer finally arrived, breaking that uncomfortable conversation. A few weeks later, while gardening alone on the side of the house, guess who showed up again? This time, my boyfriend spotted him through the front window and hurried around to introduce himself. Our neighbor reiterated his earlier stories and casually mentioned his fondness for Rottweilers. Then, in a chilling twist, he revealed he was charged for essay. He insisted it was a false accusation and kept repeating, "You make one mistake, and it ruins your life forever." The way he spoke sent shivers down our spines. We later discovered that our street had 3 such people with such records, including the previous owner's realtor, who had a history that was even more disturbing. It's no wonder the last lady kept to herself. Story 39. It's not exactly creepy, but I recently discovered something that really shocked me. A friend of mine hadn't called, texted, or even reached out to his child in over 6 months. Can you believe that? The child had been trying to connect the entire time, desperately reaching out, and yet nothing. Honestly, I don't think I could ever treat my own child like that. I still keep my distance from him. I just can't trust someone who would ignore their own flesh and blood like that. At this point, I wouldn't even help him if he were in trouble. This whole situation made me realize how important it is to be present for the people we care about. Family should come first, and letting someone slip away like that, it's simply unacceptable. It's sad to see, but some people just don't get it. Story 40. There was this guy we knew in town who started showing up at our apartment without any invitation. At first, it seemed harmless, but things took a turn when he started appearing late at night, claiming he just needed a hug. We felt too anxious to confront him. He even suggested we move in with him, and honestly, we almost considered it. Our landlords were unbearable. He bragged that his father owned the property where the local grocery store stood, implying he could help himself to whatever he wanted. He also mentioned being transgender and sought our help with makeup, but soon he seemed to forget about that entirely. One night, he knocked on our door with a wild story about how the guys at the Elks Lodge had forced him to drive through oncoming traffic to get his family back. That's when I started hiding every time I saw him coming. It was clear he was unraveling. Eventually, we moved away, and I still can't shake the feeling of paranoia when someone drops by unexpectedly. I really hope I never see him again. Story 41. I worked as a greeter at Zeller's before it shut down, and I loved striking up conversations with people. Once I met this nerdy guy because I recognized the obscure Newgrounds characters on his shirt. We started chatting, and he eventually began texting me. At first, it seemed harmless, but soon I noticed some confusing patterns, flirting that felt totally directed at me. I wasn't interested, I just wanted a gaming buddy. So I tried to let him down gently, but he didn't take it well. His response flipped from friendly to aggressive, as if I had led him on. I had to block him. A few months later, my friends got together for a Magic the Gathering night, and I didn't get an invite. I found out that this guy, a friend of a friend, had spread some negativity about me. He'd convinced them I was a terrible person for rejecting him. Luckily, my friends mostly saw through his lies. In the end, I realized I dodged a bullet. Story 42. I attended a conservative Christian college where I had a diverse friend group, including an RA who was openly gay. We were pretty progressive for our environment, so his identity didn't bother us. But over time, things started to feel off when it became clear he had crushes on a few of us. We liked him and didn't want to be homophobic, so we brushed it off. Things took a shocking turn when he broke into one of my friends' rooms. You see, Ray's had keys, and in a bizarre twist, he hid a camera inside a sock with a hole in it. He placed this sock under my friend's bed, while his roommate was away for the weekend, aiming it right at the bed. Luckily, we discovered the camera before anything went too far, and that was the last straw for our friendship. It was disappointing to see someone we trusted betray us, especially with the passive-aggressive Facebook posts and rumors that followed. But we moved on, determined to enjoy life, even if it meant learning the hard way. Story 43. As a racer, I've crossed paths with countless amazing people throughout the years, but recently I discovered something unsettling about someone I used to know. Initially, I wasn't too fond of him. He was a loudmouth and often acted like a crybaby, but then I found out he's listed on the S-offender registry. A little digging revealed that he faced charges on 3 separate occasions when he was 16, 17, and 19. The moment I learned this, my perspective shifted completely. Now, I go out of my way to avoid him. Even if it means stepping away from my friends when he's around, I prioritize my comfort and safety. It's a harsh reminder that sometimes the people we think we know can carry dark secrets. Story 44. Back in school, there was this guy, a year younger than me, who would always hang out with our group. It became a strange routine for him to casually drape his left arm around my shoulder, almost like it was the most normal thing in the world. But then, things took a bizarre turn. While he was chatting away with the other guys, he'd start to, well, let's say he'd get a little too comfortable, fiddling with my earlobes without missing a beat in his conversation. It was so surreal, and honestly, it left me wondering what on earth was going through his mind. I mean, here we were, just a group of friends hanging out, and this guy thought it was completely fine to bring this strange behavior into the mix. It definitely added a layer of weirdness to our usual hangouts, and I still can't believe how casual he was about the whole thing. Story 45. In high school, I encountered a troubling situation that still sticks with me. A classmate confided in me about his disturbing dreams of bringing a gun to school and naming specific people he would target first. It shook me to my core. I knew I had to create some distance for my safety, but deep down, I also felt a responsibility. Whenever our paths crossed, I made a point to be extra kind and approachable. It was a delicate balance, trying to protect myself, while also hoping that my kindness might make a difference. It's a reminder that sometimes we don't know the struggles others are going through, even when those struggles take a dark turn. It's crucial to be aware of the signs and support one another, even in the most challenging circumstances. Story 46. In high school, I had a friend named Jane. She was definitely unique, and since we were part of the same nerdy group, her quirks didn't bother me much. But Jane had a serious crush on another girl. Let's call her Mary. They used to be friends, but when Mary started hanging out with a new crowd, Jane became jealous. It's crucial to note that Mary didn't cut Jane off completely. She simply expanded her social circle. This led to Jane becoming clingy to an unsettling degree, ultimately causing Mary to distance herself. Things took a darker turn when Jane started stalking Mary. It wasn't subtle at all. She would fixate on Mary from across the room and even created a character that was basically a thinly veiled version of Mary, claiming it wasn't her. When one of Mary's friends confronted Jane about her behavior, it only escalated. Jane crafted another character representing that friend too, portraying her as the villain keeping Mary from true happiness. This drama played out openly on social media, not just in private journals. Eventually, I moved away for college and decided to cut ties with Jane. Later, I discovered she had a habit of hacking into friends' social media accounts to check if they were talking about her. Honestly, I'm relieved we don't have to talk anymore. Story 47. I once had a friend who I thought I knew well. Over time, I started noticing things that made me really uncomfortable, behavior that crossed boundaries and showed a lack of respect for others. At first, I tried to rationalize it, telling myself maybe I was overreacting, but the uneasy feeling kept growing. Eventually, I realized that this wasn't a one-time issue. It was a pattern, and it was serious. That was the moment I knew I had to confront him. I explained why I could no longer be friends and why I needed to protect myself and others. It wasn't easy to draw that line, but it was necessary. Since then, I've stayed far away. I learned a hard lesson. Not everyone we call a friend is trustworthy, and sometimes the right thing to do is walk away. Protecting your mental space, setting boundaries, and trusting your instincts isn't just okay, it's essential. Some people aren't meant to have a place in your life, and that's something I had to accept. The key is recognizing the red flags early and acting before it's too late. Story 48. When I was 20, I worked as a lifeguard at a water park. I didn't really click with the younger lifeguards from high school, so I spent most of my time with the supervisors who had been there for years. For the most part, it was fine. Everyone had their quirks, but there was one supervisor I could never get along with. He was odd, aggressive, and always seemed like he had something to prove. On social media, he posted countless selfies flexing in mirrors, and something about his attitude just rubbed me the wrong way. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was off. Then came a day that confirmed my instincts. He completely lost it over something minor. A girl who didn't want to hang out because she wasn't feeling well. I realized I needed to distance myself from him. My gut had been telling me something wasn't right, and it was time to trust it. A few weeks later, I learned that he had been involved in serious criminal activity. I can't go into the details here, but it was chilling. The person I thought I knew, someone I'd worked alongside and interacted with daily, was hiding a darkness I never could have imagined. That experience stuck with me. It taught me the importance of trusting my instincts, paying attention to red flags, and knowing when to distance myself from people who make me uncomfortable. Sometimes the signs are subtle at first, but they're there, and ignoring them can be dangerous. We don't always know what's going on behind someone's public persona. Protecting yourself and listening to your gut is more important than trying to rationalize away uncomfortable feelings. Story 49. At my old school, I had just come out as bisexual to my friends. It was a big moment for me, one I'd been anticipating for a long time. Right then, a girl at our table smiled and casually said something completely unexpected, that she was attracted to animals. The laughter around us faded instantly, and I felt this awkward tension settle in the air. From that moment, our dynamic changed. We didn't really talk much after, and the vibe around our group felt different. It's funny how a single comment can reshape relationships, isn't it? Sometimes things don't go as you expect, but those moments stick with you. They become stories you won't forget, reminders of how unpredictable life can be. Story 50. I discovered that my father had cheated on my stepmother with a much younger woman. When he ended things with her, he didn't take responsibility. Instead, he painted her as selfish and claimed she never had time for him. Not long after, he married this younger woman. Years passed, and one day I stumbled upon proof of his infidelity. It made me feel sick to my stomach. Here was a decent person he had mistreated just to save face. Because of this betrayal, my relationship with him is strained. Ironically, despite everything, I've remained incredibly close with my former stepmother. She's been a solid presence in my life, and our bond means more to me than ever. It's wild how the truth can change everything, and how some relationships become stronger in the midst of chaos. Story 51. In college, I started chatting with a classmate who was a bit awkward and twitchy. I didn't see any reason not to be kind, so we often found ourselves outside the classroom, striking up conversations. One day, during our usual small talk, he asked where I was from. I described my hometown as particularly small. He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical about how tiny it really was. Without missing a beat, he whipped out his tablet, opened Google Maps, and pulled up my town, several states away from our university. When the map zoomed in, I impulsively pointed out my house. That's when I heard him whisper, just barely audible, "Gotcha," as he bookmarked my home's location. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know how to react, and from that moment on, I made a point to steer clear of him. It was a simple conversation that took a strangely unsettling turn, leaving me feeling more cautious than before. Story 52. I used to think I had a pretty good read on people, but there are some moments in life that make you question everything you thought you knew. One of those moments came with a girl I considered a friend, someone I'd spent hours talking to, laughing with, and even sharing beers. She carried herself like an artist, constantly talking about her work, showing me sketches, and describing her process with such conviction that I never doubted her talent until I started noticing the cracks. It began small. I'd see her working on a piece, and something about it didn't quite add up. Lines that were supposed to be original seemed oddly familiar. Textures looked copied. One day, I realized she was literally photocopying pictures and scribbling over them with charcoal, pretending it was her own creation. It was subtle, almost clever, but once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. The illusion shattered. That night, we were hanging out, drinking beers and chatting. The mood was casual, relaxed, nothing out of the ordinary, or so I thought. I had just finished my beer and got up to go to the bathroom. When I came back, I noticed something strange. She had moved a beer into my spot and said with a smirk, "You should finish your beer." There was a beat of silence, just long enough for me to realize what was happening. I knew immediately that this beer wasn't mine. It wasn't just about the drink. It was about control. about testing boundaries, about pretending I didn't notice. I laughed it off, trying to stay light, and said, haha, no thanks. But inside, I felt a mix of amusement, disbelief, and a little unease. It was a small moment, but it revealed so much about who she really was. Someone performing, always performing, and hoping everyone would buy the act. That night stuck with me. It made me think about authenticity, about how easy it is for people to create false versions of themselves and slip them into your life. And it reminded me to pay attention, not just to what people say, but to what they actually do. Sometimes the truth sneaks in through small, almost insignificant actions. And once you see it, it changes everything. Story 53. A few years ago, I decided to try my hand at fantasy writing. My plots were fine, but my dialogue was lacking. I reached out to a few people to brainstorm ideas, get feedback, and see if my characters felt real. Only 2 agreed to help, and that's when things started to spiral into something I didn't expect. One of them seemed harmless at first. He was married, polite, and appeared genuinely interested in discussing characters and storylines. But soon, our conversations started to drift away from writing. Comments that were once about my characters became increasingly personal. Jokes turned into questions about me, about my life, and about my presence in ways that felt off. At first, I tried to ignore it. I reminded myself that maybe I was overthinking, but the messages kept coming, crossing boundaries I had clearly set. It was no longer about helping me improve my writing. It was about him and his attempts to involve me in interactions I didn't ask for. I shut him down hard. I was firm. I made it clear I wasn't interested. For a while, it seemed like he had stopped, but that brief pause was short-lived. Over the next year, I tried again to get back into writing, involving a few mutual friends and other people to help with dialogue and story development. Somehow, he ended up involved again. Conversations that were once harmless, about visiting a friend or collaborating on a story, turned into personal messages directed at me. The unease grew, making it impossible to focus on writing. Eventually, I left the group, explained the situation to my friends, and blocked him. It didn't end there. He later found new ways to contact me, messaging my business page, asking if I had seen his messages, hinting that he expected to see me in person. Each time, I had to reinforce my boundaries by blocking him again. Even when a large group of friends traveled near my area, I had to decline joining them simply because I knew he would be there. Over time, it became clear that this was not a simple misunderstanding. He and his partner even created fake social media accounts, befriending mutual friends with anonymous profiles. When I confronted them, they admitted who they were, but by then I had already blocked them. Looking back, I realized something important. Online communities can be supportive, inspiring, and safe, but only if your boundaries are respected. Some people will not take no for an answer, and that is never your fault. Protect your space, trust your instincts, and don't let anyone's behavior rob you of your passions or your peace of mind. Writing, creating, and collaborating should be empowering, not a source of fear. And while it's unfortunate I had to step away from something I loved, I also learned how important it is to prioritize my own safety and well-being. I'm sharing this story to remind anyone creating online, whether you're writing, gaming, or exploring any community, that you always have the right to walk away. You have the right to block, to leave, and to protect yourself from anyone who crosses the line. Creepy behavior is never your fault, and you are allowed to protect yourself, even if it means leaving people behind. Story 54. I was stationed in South Korea when a new guy joined our unit. It's a pretty stressful area and job, so we decided to take him out a few times to help him get to know everyone. I already knew him a little from training, so it wasn't too awkward. After a few weekends of hanging out, he started talking about how, as a kid, he got bitten by a kitten, wrapped silly putty around its head, and let it die. Then he started laughing, like it was still funny. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, hoping he would say it didn't really happen, or that he didn't actually find it funny. When he confirmed that it did happen, and that he still found it funny, I told him to f off and treated him like shit for the rest of the time we worked together. I don't care who you are. If you abuse animals and still think it's funny as an adult, you are a horrible person. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.